Hello everyone, Volty here back with another episode of There Can Be Only One. Today I am joined by my lovely friend BenT Tudman to talk about some of the VFN stuff that's been happening, some of the Highlander stuff that's been happening, but more importantly, get everyone prepped and hyped for Mana Clash coming up this weekend at Coburg Town Hall. Ben, feel free to introduce yourself here.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is obviously Ben. I am these days, Melbourne-based competitive grinder. Traditionally, I grew up in Sydney. I've been playing Magic since about 6th edition, I think. I don't have many memories from when I was that age, but, early on, early adjacent. And then I guess I got into competitive Magic a bit over 10 years ago. When I had a bunch of mates and I dragged them up to Brisbane for a Grand Prix, which was my first serious event, and I got into Highlander a little over 3 months ago, which has been a very fun start to 2025.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how the Sydney players, on average, have been disconnected from 7 Point over the course of a long period of time. And I was talking about this with Jack last time as well, just because New South Wales was kind of detached from 7 Point for the longest time. It was very much a Canberra versus Melbourne type thing. And so you and me, who were both based in Sydney at the time, knew about 7 Point and vaguely participated in it when it was relevant. But I think definitely over the last 5 years or so, that's been my return to 7 Point, and then you've come in much more recently, which is very interesting. And that leads me to my first real question. What has been drawing you to 7 Point?
Yeah, so as a competitive grinder, there's a lot of net decking. There's a lot of here's the decks that are performing. Here's the way to build them. Here's a healthy amount of data and analysis on a particular card choice or a sideboard card or whatever it might be. With 7 Point, partly because of the size of the format and partly because it's singleton and so it's harder to draw real data conclusions, there's not that level of solving of a format. There's not quite the same situation where all of a sudden, there's an obvious best deck, it starts dominating online, everyone picks it up, can't lose with it, and now all of a sudden you're in with a Nadu situation or a Breach situation in Modern. So 7 Point takes me back to the early days when I was engaging with competitive Magic, before I was exposed to all of the data and before I was exposed to that level of solving metagames. And it is just I get to deep dive into one archetype, which is what I've done. I get to really pick apart all of the individual choices. I get to think about it obsessively, and it's the sweet spot for me personally. Not quite that kitchen table Magic level, which is for lack of a better word, a little bit loosey goosey, and not quite that competitive format. The PT supported formats, whatever it might be. It's in this really sweet spot where it really rewards that kind of obsessive behavior on a deck or an archetype broadly, getting into the minutiae of it, exploring fringe ways to build decks and sideboard archetypes, and the potential that one of those experiments could actually be a really good option. Whereas when you approach a more solved metagame in a competitive format, odds are someone else has tried it and it was bad. Where in Highlander, you could be onto something, right? And that's just a smaller community, I guess. It's a much more obsessive community, but it really gets, really scratches that itch on getting to obsess over this thing and make this yours. So it makes me get to think about the deck construction, the positioning, the strategy, the game plans of the archetype, and that endlessly tweaking the slots, and watching as the evolution of even the sideboard hate against my pet deck as that's evolved over literally the last month, and so I'm transitioning my deck to minimize the impact of that sideboard and making tweaks. We're revisiting cards from a couple of months back that I dismissed at the time because they weren't quite impactful enough, but now I'm actually the thing it was doing well was bridging and we'll get to maybe an example later. And that's what I really need right now, so I'm going to bring that back in, even though it wasn't strong 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that does translate to some of the constructed formats very periodically, especially as bans happen. People will ask me, like, what should I play in Modern, what should I play in Standard, and it's like, pick one of the 3 best decks that looks like you'll enjoy it, and then just play it till your eyes bleed, because that's the way to play those formats. And then we go through ebbs and flows in the constructed formats, where a deck that fell out of favor because of, the new rock deck that was appearing is suddenly viable because people are shifting towards rock/paper or all the way to paper. And with 7 Point, that doesn't get presented in archetypes as much as it does in card choices. Whether or not your Grixis or your blue-black mid-range deck goes really big, or whether it's really low to the ground and you're playing a Stifle, for example, those decisions do matter and build up over time. So, yeah, I mean, making sure that you have the 120 cards-ish for your deck, and you know exactly how they all function, so you can present the best 75 of them, definitely gets rewarded in this format more than others, and I think it would make perfect sense that someone would be drawn to the format when coming from the competitive scene. Well, in that regard, in terms of shifting metagames and in terms of shifting card choices, obviously I run the VFN series, for those of you who aren't aware. It's basically a Moto 7-point Highlander structure where we run 2 to 3 events a weekend, and we make sure that people can play as much Highlander as they want without some of the hassles, I guess you'd call it, of paper tournaments, like traveling to an LGS, buying new sleeves because your deck is out of touch, buying new cards, for example. So in terms of the VFN series, you're obviously playing a lot of them. Currently scheduled to get an invite via the seasonal invitee board, so Season 2. If not, for some reason, you are also currently scheduled to get an annual leaderboard invite. So I think the odds that Ben is going to appear in the Invitational are pretty high. Things would have to really go off the rails. But, as someone who plays a lot of Magic, what makes you choose VFN, I guess?
Yeah, I think you touched on a few of the elements there. Convenience is certainly a thing. It's really nice to come home after work on a Friday and just boot up Moto and be good to go. I think the thing that sets the VFN series apart from Highlander, which is mostly paper Magic as a format, is the flexibility for me to just do weird experiments. Right? I talked a little bit about this experimentation thing a second ago, but I'm an Eldrazi gamer. I am one of those annoying people, but VFN has let me do really easily just pick up some weird packages and chuck them in. So I experimented with an 8-point Eldrazi build that I might not otherwise, because it might not be my best version of the deck, and it might not be a deck, something that I'm advocating for, but with the VFN series, like, it's, if one of the 3 weekend events, I'd play an 8-point build, that's fine, right? It doesn't matter that much. The other one that I've experimented with a little bit lately, and I'll get back to after the big event that's happening next weekend, which is a little serious, is a fast bond build of Eldrazi, right? So, leaning into the fact that you have all these land shooters, playing Strip, Waste, fast bond, Crucible effects. And that's a really sweet sub-archetype that I'm keen to explore more of, and VFN really enables that sort of experimentation. And then I guess the other thing that I will say is just it's a cute little community, right? Like, we have this, you get 30 odd people sitting in the stream chatting, gambling their arbitrary points. I get to do things like, bet all my points against me, and light them on fire, unfortunately, for that particular instance. But yeah, so it's like it's a little safe space where we get to talk about life, as well as obviously the Magic, which is what brings us all together in the first place. So I really appreciate it, and I would thank you for putting it on.
I try really hard, so I'm glad that people are appreciating it. And I mean, I say that, I get a lot of positive feedback. Like, I'm not just, this isn't the first instance where someone's been like, yeah, VFN's great, but Yeah, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, I do think that it's offering a niche that people don't have access to otherwise. We've got people from very remote parts of New South Wales who are playing VFNs pretty regularly. We've got a couple of Queenslanders who are showing up more and more. We've got, a Canadian player, multiple American players. Paul Croucher in Amsterdam, who gets to play when he can. So yeah, it's nice. All right. Well, you've touched on the favorite archetypes, so I guess we'll move on to a more interesting question. And this is free form, and I won't take any of these responses too personally. But what changes would improve 7 Point from your perspective?
Yeah, well, you're going to get the partially joke answer first.
The price of progress.
That's further on. That's no. Planar Nexus did nothing wrong. At the moment.
Okay.
And I think this speaks more to my how do you construct a healthy metagame format? And we've obviously spoken quite a bit about this, and I think Planar Nexus was the right card to point if you were trying to hurt big mana. But I'm not sure that this was the time to hurt big mana. And so my logic around this is, what does a healthy metagame look like? And then loosely speaking, that's probably something like 30% mid-range, 20% aggro, 10% control, 10-15% combo, 10% big mana, 5% kind of decks that don't fit into these macro types, and then a little bit of flex across the top. So, any one given week you might see a bit more mid-range, and then next week you might see a bit more control to mitigate it or whatever you're trying to flex. But I think we're not quite at that level in Highlander at the moment. I think there's of those macro types, one of them is quite well represented whenever you look at data. And I think it's holding back a few of the other options, and I think big mana is the natural predator to mid-range, which means if you are trying to, and obviously everyone can disagree on what percentage points they are, but I think if you're trying to curate an environment where each of the macro types are viable, so everyone can pick up and play, find something in their style of gameplay that they really like that is going to be, able to top 8, able to be competitive. I think the thing that's dominating at the moment is mid-range. It has a natural predator, at least, within that, and so I wouldn't want to hurt the natural predator. So from a health of the format perspective, I think that having big mana, because you can beat up on big mana. It is not hard.
Yeah.
It is not mid-range is trying to position itself as being good across the board, whereas big mana is like, well, I'm going to beat up on this one thing, and if someone turn one Ragavans me, I'm in trouble, right? Or price of progress, or
Black Lotus,
or Black Lotus, or Strip and Waste, right? There's a lot of ways you can target big mana, whereas mid-range is just generic, all the best cards you can find. So I think you want to maintain a predator to that, because otherwise the risk is the mid-range becomes 50% or more. Plan Nexus doing nothing wrong. Obviously I have a bias and an agenda here, but that's why I'm saying that, rather than just being don't point my favorite deck, which also don't point my favorite deck. But yeah, and I think that's my take on what format curation should be, and I think it's mostly to do with letting everyone enjoy their niche. And I think that the risk to the niche at the moment is that mid-range is so efficient that it can kind of beat up on everything. And I think, to be fair, big mana is not the one that's least represented in this stats number. I think the one that probably needs the most support is control.
Yes.
As much as I don't enjoy playing against control, control is the one that's kind of lowest down on this, is furthest away from where I think a healthy metagame would be. But I think that's partly because the mid-range decks are the black-blue shell of the mid-range decks. Obviously, there's a number of various builds within that, are doing such a good job of keeping control down at the moment. That this is why I say if you want to bring up control, maybe and to be fair, big mana is probably also beating up on control, so maybe that's not the best solution of it, but a rebalancing of it so that big mana is holding mid-range back, which then also lets an aggro deck or aggro archetypes flourish, which then brings control back onto the table. Like there's this kind of like moving more than rock paper scissors. There's more than just the three. It's Lizard Spock as well, right? Like it's you got a few extras in there. So look, honestly, incredibly hard to curate a format. I'm not trying to throw shade or anything, but I would, My central hypothesis is at the moment that mid-range is quite a large meta share, and you can't. It's very hard to point mid-range. They're just going to play the best card.
Yeah.
So the way to keep mid-range in check is to allow a natural predator.
Very, very nuanced, yeah. I mean, I think the core issue, as you said, is you can't point mid-range as an archetype. I do think that I want to be more aggressive with depointing cards that don't belong in mid-range, and that would give a bit more flexibility and a bit more power to the other archetypes. Natural Order was most likely a failed experiment in that regard, although
I mean, it went straight into mid-range.
Yeah. I mean, I have my opinions on that card, let's just say. But I think, there are a lot of cards on the points list that just won't get slotted into mid-range decks, even if they're at 0 or even if they're at -1 point from where they are. That would impact or improve other archetypes. I think Top is one of the most clear examples in my head, where it's just like an unplayable card if you're playing Thought Teasers and stuff, because why would you spend a mana on it? But if you're playing a control deck and you want Terminus, then you can do the thing. The whole issue of having Top at 0 points in every round, getting an artificial 7 minutes, is a whole other issue that I can't theoretically do anything about, but
don't disagree, but yeah.
But it's that kind of change that, in theory, could improve with the archetype distribution. And, that's a very complex problem, as you're aware, and most people watching will be aware. The nature of 7 Point as a competitive format, where it has a few large events over the course of the year, and then everything else is kind of flat and even. Back in the day when we had PTs and GPs and then slower, lower level formats, you would get a lot more, I guess, movement over time as people needed to adjust to things. And with 7 Point, there is some percentage of the population that moves very, very frequently and very, very aggressively, and then everyone else who doesn't change their deck every 3 months. So, yeah, there's a lot of things, and I mean, my position as a committee member is to always keep learning and to always keep aiming for those lofty goals. I know that there are previous committee members and current committee members that are more inclined to accept the status quo, where I'm viewed as a radical, and, that's fine. But, yeah, I would say I am on your team in that sense. Alright, let's do a couple of quick fires. What's the best pointed card?
I don't know what the best pointed card is. I mean, every time I cut Soul Ring from my deck, I'm miserable. Okay. So, I don't know. If it went down, I think it would be too ubiquitous. So, that's possibly my vote for
okay.
The impact. I'm sure but they're all hyper powerful cards, right? If you had to ask me what my favorite card that I'm not playing at the moment would be, it's probably a toss up between Deathrite or Nadu. I'm a big fan of creature based combo enablers and cards, so I don't know what the best is in a vacuum. That's a really hard question.
I mean, Soul Ring is a reasonable knee-jerk response. But honestly, if your favorites are Deathrite and Nadu, I think Deathrite is a very serious contender for best pointed card at its points value. In that case, what is the best unpointed card? And subsequent brackets, what is your favorite unpointed card? And those do have to be separate.
Oh, no agenda here, but we could name Consigned to Memory or Price of Progress as the best unpointed cards. Serious Answer might be the Miracle Reanimator card.
Metamorphosis Fanatic.
Yeah, I think that's very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my favourite unpointed card is Sire of Seven Deaths.
Okay.
Which...
That's fair. I mean, there are a lot of things you could name out of Eldrazi. Like, your points are very condensed, and a lot of your cards are very high impact. I wouldn't be surprised if it would be Khan, or TPE, for example, but I have very good... Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Sire of Seven Deaths is a sweet one.
So I said favourite rather than best. Like, I think there's better cards in the deck that are unpointed, but Sire just tickles my lizard brain, or my spaghetti monster brain, in just that sweet way where, like,
I mean,
happy.
I don't know if that card exists on Arena, but it would be kind of goofy to see all the little different icons on it at the same time. The little bow and arrow and
standard legal card.
Is it? Okay. I kind of need to see what that looks like on Arena, because they have little icons on Arena for the different keywords. So
I mean, it would have the giant bow and arrow on it, and people would still attack with it into their flyers.
Well, yeah, because Reach is like the 5th line down on the card. Like, at that point, most people's brains have tuned out. I don't think it's their fault.
I think the one that people miss most on it, funnily enough, is Menace.
It has Menace?
It has Menace. The number of times people have tried to block with one creature, I'm like, you can't do that. Yeah.
I didn't know I had Menace. There you go.
I think people are wise to the fact that all Eldrazi have Reach. But Menace is the one that gets people. Yeah,
I think it has Vigilance, right?
It has, yes.
I wonder if I could guess them. I know it has. So Reach, Menace, apparently Vigilance, Ward, pay 7. I assume it has Lifelink because you've usually gained life with it. There's no way it has like First Strike, but I guess it could have.
It has First Strike.
It has First Strike. Okay, so there's one left between. What are the options? Death Touch, Trample, and I think those are the realistic options. Yeah, it has Reach and one flying.
Yeah.
So I guess it's Death Touch.
No, it's Trample.
It's Trample. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess First Strike, Death Touch, Menace just makes it completely unblockable. So Trample makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. I think Metamorphosis Fanatic is a pretty strong contender. I do appreciate that you steered away from, Brainstorm and Thoughtseize and Lightning Bolt and all the boring answers. Metamorphosis Fanatic is a card that I've kept my eye on, so yeah, viewing it as best unpointed. Honestly, you mentioned Price of Progress, and I think if that card was a point, more people would be reminded of its existence and be playing it and be killing people with it. For some reason, everyone just forgets that you can put Price of Progress in your deck. It's crazy.
No, I mean, I think the reason that Price of Progress sees less play is a lot of people playing at 3 and 4 color decks, right? All these mid-range soup piles. And my team has experimented with it out of Grixis' sideboard, right? It hurts the person casting it quite a bit. I think it leads to a lot of draws.
Draws are fine. Yogg-Saron was the most playable tournament card in Hearthstone for the time that it was legal. Because either you were behind and it won you the game, you were behind and it lost you the game but you were losing anyway, or you just ran it out when it was even and then you just crossed your fingers. Price of Progress, when you take 6 but you're on 7, almost always wins you the game. That's all I'm saying. Card's great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god, this dog. Alright. Alright, so the other questions we can leave to wrap up, but let's talk about Mana Clash. Let's talk about why we're here. Next weekend, for those of you who don't know, Mana Clash is going to be held at Coburg Town Hall over the course of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's going to be the 25th, 6th, and 7th. There's going to be a lot of stuff on. We've got artists. We've got 2 major events. We've got a bunch of side events available. There is tattooing available. If you want a free tattoo of the Josh and Pat's MTG Bazaar hammer, that is something that can be organized, apparently. I'm currently on the fence about it, but I do think it would be a good bit. If there were big major events on next week, would you choose them over Mana Clash if they led to the PT, for example? So if hypothetically there was an RC, would you choose Mana Clash or the RC?
Ooh, I'm a real sucker for teams. So for me, like I grew up playing team sports. I grew up with that environment, and that is something that really appeals to me. And so you're never going to get that in a PT enabled, not these days at least, enabled format. So I mean, probably the reason I'm playing Highlander at all is because there was a team event at the start of the year. And so the fact that I get to do a team event on the Sunday for Mana Clash, I'm so excited. So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad I don't have to make that choice. I am a serious grinder, but teams is the way that I want to play Magic, and so yeah, might be that.
Hell yeah! All right, fun hypothetical. You have an incredible weekend. You win a time walk on Saturday. It is 10:45 p.m. You are completely exhausted, and you have to do a winner's interview in the morning. And then on Sunday, you and the boys win 3 tropical islands. Which one of those matters more?
The time walk or the event win, or the card that I'm winning?
The event win.
The event win, trios, hands down.
Hell yeah. And that's why you need to be at Mana Clash. We get maybe 3 teams events over the course of a year, if that. I've vaguely been workshopping Team VFN. I have no idea how I'm going to make that work. But in theory, it's probably going to be like you're allowed to be in a Discord call with your teammates and you all screen share, and that's like the team's energy. That would be the best thing I could do there. Do you have anything you want to share about your Mana Clash prep, or how you plan on approaching this big weekend, in terms of, someone who's new to Magic or new to 7 Point, this is their first big event, they roughly know what they should be doing, but, maybe they've played like 1 or 2 comp rel events. Give some advice to the newbies.
Ooh, I think the biggest advice is always just find people that you enjoy the company of, that are or better at your level at the game, and talk about it and think about it, right? So some people obviously can do this as an island and power to them, but for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, particularly if you're new at this, it's an information sharing is one of the most valuable things, and testing with someone else and talking through lines and talking through decisions and choices and everything else is going to accelerate you and get you moving forward more than anything else. And so that can just be your friend who's at the LGS and you just sit down, jam a bunch of games and talk about it. You can go and seek out other players in the same macro or archetype as you. I know that there's a colorless chat going around at the moment with a bunch of us not necessarily spaghetti monsters, but people who want to tap ancient tombs talking about Magic. And so there's these archetypes that will also just naturally have a gravitation to you. You can find them through the 7 Point Island Discord, you can find them through the VDFN Discord, but yeah, nothing is going to beat sitting down, playing a bunch of Magic, but not just playing it, but also reflecting on it and talking about it and sort of bouncing ideas off of each other and all of that stuff. So I guess the advice is find your people, right? Find the people who are on your level, who are going to engage with the game in a similar way to you, who aren't dickheads, who are gonna be supportive and work with you at the same like amount of effort and time and everything else. And that doesn't have to be, that can be online, right? The VFN series lets you do that. But leading up into an event like this, the more you think and talk about it, the more you'll improve. And I think at its core, Magic's a game about evolution, about evolving metagames, about evolving skill sets, about evolving thinking and strategy and everything else. And it's difficult to get to that by yourself. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well said. Magic, I mean, we talk about it obviously in a meme sense of Magic is meant to be about the gathering, but really that is what it boils down to. And whether or not you're trying to make friends or whether or not you're trying to do well, surrounding yourself with people is by far the easiest way to do it. Doing it in an online space where you're a bit more detached, this is mainly for people who are neurodivergent and struggle to have face-to-face interactions. There are avenues for that. Existing in a physical space and engaging with people at a big event is pretty daunting. So special shout out if you're at Mana Clash and you feel uncomfortable, or you're trying to talk to people or trying to make friends and you don't really know how to do it, come see me at the booth. I am very far on one end of the spectrum and I'm more than happy to help out. But yeah, if you're preparing for the event, find your people. There's servers for pretty much every macro archetype in 7 Point. There's a server for 7 Point with multiple sub-channels. There's also, I would say, probably thousands of servers based on different areas of the country and different groups of people and different groups of friends. I run the Volti server, but I think I own maybe 5 servers in total that I use periodically for different purposes. It's just, yeah, it's one of those things. Alright, one more short question and then we'll wrap up here. What bad card do you really, really, really want to be good in 7 Point?
I mean, I think this is an answer. You'll always get a nostalgic answer no matter who you ask it. So it probably depends on the person and like in the era that they kind of got involved in this thing. For me, that would be 2013 Kiki Pod. The card that I miss most from that would be Glenalendra Archmage.
My beloved.
So Volti sent me these questions through earlier, and I was thinking about it, and I wrote it down. And immediately my brain starts going, all right, how do I make this work? Right? How do I mess with the persistent mechanic in such a way that it just leads to infinite counter spells or something like that? This question has tickled something in my brain, and we're going to think about this after Mana Clash because I don't have time to brew a Glenalendra Archmage deck in the 5 days. Yes, that would be my card. Fun fact,
in my run to top 8 at CanCon, Glenalendra was the only loss I had in Swiss. Was potting into a Glenalendra, and my hand was Court of Calling, Green Sun Zenith, Natural Order, and I'd been stifled in the early game playing Mana Dorks, and I was like, oh, I'm just dead. Cool. Yeah, that was like 15 years ago, by the way, for anyone curious.
I was going to say, that's recent. I need to see that list, but no, okay. Yeah.
No, yeah, that was me borrowing an emerald and paying a point for like Birthing Pod and paying a point for Green Sun Zenith and a couple of other things. They paying like 1 or 2 points for, Cradle plus NO. It was a time. But when you were putting Hoof into play instead of Atraxa, you really did have to put like Arbor Elf in your deck. And so, my CanCon top 8 list had an Arbor Elf. I think I had a Derogatory Speaker as well, but that one was less good. Look, Ben, it's been lovely having you on. I'm going to attempt to make sure that you get an interview spot in the Mana Clash weekend to talk about Bus Stop and some other stuff. Over the course of the next week, I'll try and release a bit more content in preparation for Mana Clash, but importantly, if you're watching this video, there will be links down below to the Bazaar Coverage YouTube channel and Twitch channel. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the Twitch channel so you don't miss that coverage when it starts. But otherwise, that's going to be it from me. Feel free to check out the VFN series. Feel free to jump into some events and lose to Ben here. But otherwise, anything you want to shout out to the people?
No, just another shout out to Josh and Pat's Bazaar. You guys are really doing a lot for everyone, and so it's great to have you around. Obviously, Volty, yourself as well. VFN has been great, I think. And yeah, I will hopefully see everyone at Mana Clash next weekend, or otherwise, I'm sure you'll pair into me at a VFN sometime.
See you all next week, gang.